أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Suzy Ismail from Cornerstone. I'm happy to be with you again as we journey through Ramadan resilience, recognizing how we can rebuild ourselves emotionally, mentally, socially, relationally, and spiritually as we journey through the tests and the tribulations of this life. So we've been talking about the heavy emotions. We talked about sadness, we talked about grief and sorrow, and in our last episode we took a deeper dive into depression and understanding that depression is an ailment. Clinical depression, when diagnosed, is an illness, just like any other illness that we may have, and we do need to tackle it, we do need to address it. And as much as there is the spiritual approach that we take in addressing depression, being able to recognize in the Quran moments of difficulty that our predecessors have experienced, our Islamic role models have experienced, and recognizing how we can respond to it, we also have to understand that there are other outlets and avenues, that yes, there is medication, there are antidepressants that may be needed, there are anti-anxiety medications that may be needed. We tend to shy away from even thinking about medications because there is that stigma, but we want to recognize and understand that a holistic approach is important, looking at all of the different avenues of depression, diagnosing it, and understanding that there may be a chemical aspect to it, all along with the environmental, and not trying to only piece it and address it in different parts, and recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all, that what may work for one person may be different for another person. But the importance when we see someone who is struggling with depression, when we ourselves may be experiencing depression, and the importance in tackling that depression is, again, identifying it, removing the shame and the stigma that surrounds it, but also recognizing that depression can lead to an even darker place. And that darker place is a state of despair. Despair is when we get to a place of hopelessness, when we no longer just think that maybe I shouldn't be here, or maybe life would be better if I didn't exist in it, but we take it to that next level where we start to think about how we might remove ourselves from this journey. And this is what we call suicide ideation. When we look at suicide ideation, we see different levels of flags. Now, in the state when someone is experiencing depression, when their functionality is being affected, when they are unable to do the things they used to do, that's the first line in which we identify the need for help, the need for intervention. Whether that intervention is a therapeutic intervention, going to a specific therapist or counselor, whether it's going to your primary care physician talking about what you're experiencing, whether it's reaching out to a friend, a family member, but not doing it alone. Because when we struggle with depression alone, we can sometimes find ourselves in that place of hopelessness. Now, recently there was a study that was released by the Islamic psychology lab in Stanford, in which it was found that Muslim Americans are twice as likely, Muslim Americans, and I believe it was between the age of 18 and 25, are twice as likely to attempt suicide as non-Muslims. This is a really real fact, and I want us all to reflect on it for a moment, because we've all heard the stories, we've all seen the news where we see young Muslims who take not only their own lives, but in certain cases, even the lives of their family members. So that hopelessness, it exists. But when we look to our deen, we see that Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran reminds us, "La taqnatu min rahmatillah." Do not despair of the mercy of Allah. That we reach that state of hopelessness, we reach that state of despair when we feel that the trouble, the difficulty, is greater than the mercy of Allah. And this is one of the tricks of Shaitan, to make us believe that whatever we're experiencing right now, that we won't get through it, that Allah has forgotten us or forsaken us. And that's what leads to that hopelessness. So when we bring ourselves back to the recognition that Allah Azza wa Jal will never forsake us, and we read in Surah Al-Duha that reminder that Allah does not forsake His creation, it brings us back to a place of understanding and recognition that there is no reason to despair. And again, we see examples in the Quran when we look at Yaqub alayhi salam, the father of Yusuf alayhi salam. he experienced deep, profound grief. When he was told by the siblings of Yusuf alayhi salam that Yusuf had been eaten by a wolf, he cried. And he cried to the point where in the Quran we are told he lost his sight. This is a profound grief, and the tears are there because of that sadness. And yet he did not despair. He did not despair, he did not give up. Just like Maryam alayhi salam in the example we used in the last episode did not despair. Just as the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam never experienced despair despite everything that was thrown at him. Because when we despair, then we fall into that state where we are giving up and believing that the mercy of Allah will not protect us, will not save us. So we see even with Yaqub alayhi salam, he was reunited with Yusuf alayhi salam. And it took years, and it took time, and it may be really difficult to work through that depression, to get through that state that you're in, but you don't have to do it alone. And having that sense of community, that connection, the family members, the counselor, utilizing all of the blessings that Allah Azza wa Jal surrounds you with can help you get through it. So I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal eases the burdens of all of us who experience that difficulty and may fall into a state of depression. And I pray that Allah Azza wa Jal keeps us all steadfast in that place of hope where we recognize that His mercy, His compassion is bigger than any pain that we go through. Please join us in our next episode as we continue this journey of understanding our mental and emotional health from a spiritual perspective. Jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum.